It all began on one of those evenings that the city never forgets. The rain wasn't gentle that night. It came down in sheets, hammering against windows, bouncing off the asphalt, and turning the streets into a mirror of flickering lights. People rushed to the downpour, umbrellas colliding like tiny battles in the chaos, shoes splashing in muddy puddles, and horns blaring in frustration as traffic snarled. Everyone was in a hurry to escape the storm. Everyone, except a little girl sitting alone under a tired, flickering street lamp. Her name was Lily, just 12 years old. But if you looked closely at her eyes, you wouldn't see the carefree sparkle of a child. You'd see the weight of someone who had already lived through too much. Her shoes were torn at the sides. Her faded dress clung to her small frame, soaked from the rain, and her dark hair was plastered to her forehead. In her hands, she held a small cardboard box, worn out from being handled too often. Inside were neatly stacked packets of tissues, her only means of survival. Every evening, Lily sat there, hoping to sell enough to buy a little food for her sick mother. Her father had passed away months ago, leaving them with nothing but memories and unpaid hospital bills. Since then, Lily had carried a burden no child should ever bear. She worked while other children played. She counted coins while others counted stars. But despite it all, Lily's spirit hadn't broken. Her eyes carried determination, a quiet strength that came from love. Every packet she sold was not just paper. It was medicine for her mother, maybe even bread for dinner. That night, though, as the rain grew heavier, no one stopped for tissues. People brushed past her, shielding themselves, pretending not to see the little girl shivering under the lamp. Just when she thought the night would end like so many others, with empty hands and a hungry stomach, something happened. A sharp screech split the air. A sleek black luxury car swerved wildly on the slippery road, its tires cutting across a deep puddle. Water splashed up in waves as the car skidded, before finally jolting to a halt against the curb, right in front of Lily. Her heart jumped. For a moment, she froze. The car was massive, intimidating, the kind she had only ever seen from afar. She had heard people talk about cars like this, symbols of wealth and power, worth more than anything she could dream of. But now it wasn't just a car. It was trouble. Through the rain-streaked window, Lily saw him, the man behind the wheel. His body slumped against the steering wheel, motionless. His face was pale, drained of color, and his chest rose only slightly, struggling for air. This was Mr. Anderson. Though Lily didn't know his name at that moment, to the world, he was a millionaire businessman, feared in boardrooms, admired in newspapers, a man whose name was attached to towering buildings that touched the sky. People called him ruthless, powerful, untouchable. But to Lily, in that moment, he wasn't powerful at all. He was fragile, human, and in danger. Her instincts took over before her mind could process the fear. She dropped her tissue box, letting it fall into the muddy puddle, and ran toward the car. Rain drenched her even more, cold water seeping into her skin. But she didn't stop. She grabbed the heavy door handle and pulled with all her might. At first, it wouldn't budge. Her small hand slipped. Her strength was nothing against the weight of steel. But she clenched her teeth and tried again. She pulled, tugged, and with one desperate effort, the door gave way. Sir, are you okay?" Lily's voice trembled, but it was firm with concern. The man didn't respond. His head leaned to the side, his breath shallow. Panic surged in Lily's chest. She was just a child. What could she possibly do? But her heart wouldn't let her walk away. She shook his shoulder gently, then harder. "Please wake up," she pleaded, her voice breaking to the noise of the storm. For a second, it felt like the world had stopped. The rain hammered around them. Cars honked in the distance. People rushed by. But in that little corner, under that failing street lamp, it was just a 12-year-old girl and a dying millionaire. Lily's mind raced. She remembered how her father used to check on her mother when she fainted from illness. "Check if they're breathing," he had told her once. She leaned close, her tiny hand trembling as she hovered it near the man's mouth. Relief washed over her when she felt faint, warm breaths. He was alive, but barely. Her eyes darted around. She had no phone, no adults beside her, no one stopping to help. Everyone pretended not to notice the scene, too busy saving themselves from the rain. Lily realized, with a sinking feeling, that if she didn't act fast, no one else would. "Hold on," she whispered, as if the man could hear her. "I won't leave you." She pulled off her thin scarf and wiped the rain off his face. Then, gathering courage, she stepped out into the street, waving desperately at passing cars. "Help! Somebody, please. He needs help." But drivers just swerved past, annoyed, unwilling to stop. The weight of the moment pressed on her. But Lily didn't give up. She returned to his side, holding his cold hand between her small palms. "Please stay with me, sir. Please don't go." That night, Lily was just a poor girl on the street. But in her heart, something powerful was stirring. Compassion stronger than fear, courage stronger than despair. And in that rain-soaked corner, destiny quietly began weaving a story that neither Lily nor Mr. Anderson could have imagined. It all started on a night when the sky seemed to be crying with all its might. Rain hammered down against the city streets, turning them into slick rivers of water and reflecting the glow of neon signs like a broken mirror. Umbrellas collided as people pushed past each other, desperate to get home before they were soaked to the bone. Horns blared from every direction, impatient drivers shouting curses, frustrated at the endless traffic. The city was loud, messy, and chaotic, like it was holding its breath. But just a few steps away from all that noise, on a lonely corner, sat a little girl who didn't seem to belong to the rush of the world. She was only 12. Her name was Lily. The street lamp above her flickered, buzzing faintly as though it too was tired of fighting the storm. Beneath it, Lily's small figure looked even smaller. Her shoes were torn at the sides, so thin they barely shielded her feet from the cold puddles. Her faded dress clung to her shivering body, soaked through by the downpour. In her tiny hands, she clutched a damp cardboard box filled with packets of tissues, the only thing standing between her family and hunger. Every night, Lily sat there. She wasn't begging for money. She wasn't stealing. She was working, in the only way she knew how, hoping passers-by would spare a few coins for a packet of tissues. Most nights, people didn't even glance her way. They hurried past, faces hidden under umbrellas, pretending not to see her. To them, she was invisible. But to Lily, each coin meant medicine for her sick mother. Each small sale meant they could eat just a little that night. Her life had not always been this way. Not long ago, she had a father who held her hand, who told her stories, who carried her on his shoulders. But his sudden passing had left him with nothing but grief and unpaid hospital bills. Her mother, already frail, grew weaker every day. And so, Lily became the one who had to fight for them both. At 12 years old, she had become the head of the family, the provider, the caretaker. And though her body was small, her heart carried more courage than most adults. That night, however, the rain was merciless. Hours passed, and not a single person stopped to buy tissues. Lily pulled her thin scarf tighter around her shoulders, trying to block out the cold. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it, used to the emptiness by now. She kept telling herself, just one packet. If I can just sell one, Mama can eat tonight. Then, suddenly, the night changed. A sharp screech tore through the sound of rainfall. Lily's eyes darted up just in time to see a sleek black car swerving uncontrollably on the wet road. Its tires skidded across a puddle, sending dirty water splashing high into the air. The powerful vehicle veered dangerously close to the curb before finally slamming to a stop right in front of her. Lily gasped, her heart hammering in her chest. For a moment, she froze in fear. The car was unlike anything she had ever touched, the kind of vehicle that screamed wealth and status. She had only ever seen cars like that in magazines tossed aside on the street. But right now, it wasn't a symbol of success. It was a cry for help. Through the rain-blurred window, she caught sight of the man behind the wheel. His head had fallen forward, resting heavily on the steering wheel. His skin looked ghostly pale, his chest barely moving. He wasn't a powerful man in that moment. He was fragile, helpless. That man was Mr. Anderson. a name that carried weight in the city. A millionaire, a businessman known for his towering skyscrapers and ruthless deals. The newspapers praised him, the businessmen feared him, and the city envied him. But tonight, stripped of all that power, he was just another human being lost in the storm. Lily didn't think twice. She didn't stop to weigh her options or consider the risk. Her little box of tissues slipped from her hands into the muddy puddle as she darted toward the car. Rain pelted her face, soaking her hair, but she pressed on, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached for the car's heavy door handle. It was slick with water, and at first, it wouldn't budge. Her small hand slipped. Her strength felt useless against the weight of metal. But Lily wasn't someone who gave up easily. She braced her feet against the curb, gritted her teeth, and pulled again with every ounce of strength her tiny body could muster. The door finally gave way with a groan. Cold air rushed out, mixing with the rain. Sir, are you okay?" Lily cried, her voice trembling but filled with urgency. Mr. Anderson didn't answer. His head remained slumped, his eyes closed. Fear gripped Lily's chest, but she forced herself closer, shaking his shoulder gently, then harder. "Please wake up. Can you hear me?" No response. Her eyes widened. What if he wasn't breathing? What if he was... The thought made her throat tighten. But Lily remembered something. Her father had once told her when her mother fainted, always check the breathing first. Leaning closer, Lily placed her trembling hand near his mouth. Relief flooded her when she felt the faint warmth of breath against her skin. He was alive, but only just. Her gaze darted around the busy street. Dozens of people hurried by, umbrellas covering their faces. Some glanced for a moment, curiosity flickering in her eyes, but then turned away. No one wanted to get involved. No one wanted to stop. Lily's heart sank. She was just a child. How could she save this man on her own? But then another thought struck her. If I don't help him, no one will. Tears stung her eyes as she held his cold hand in her small palms. "Please stay with me, sir. Don't leave me. I'll find help, I promise." She stumbled back into the street, waving desperately at passing cars. "Help! Somebody, please. He's sick. Please stop." Her voice cracked, swallowed by the storm, but she didn't stop screaming. Car after car sped by, splashing water in her direction, drivers too impatient or uncaring to notice the soaked, frantic girl. But Lily refused to give up. She ran back to Mr. Anderson's side, her chest heaving from exhaustion, her eyes burning with tears. She wiped the rain from his face with her scarf, whispering softly, "It's going to be okay. I'm here. I won't leave you." And in that fragile moment, just a poor 12-year-old girl and a dying millionaire, the seeds of an extraordinary story began to take root. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the steady beeping of machines and the quiet murmur of nurses' footsteps in the hallway. The storm outside had long subsided, leaving behind the soft drip-drip of rainwater sliding down the hospital windows. Inside one of the rooms, a man stirred weakly in his bed, his eyelids fluttering open for the first time since the accident. Mr. Anderson blinked against the sterile white light above him. His head felt heavy, his body weak. For a moment, he had no idea where he was. The last thing he remembered was the sound of screeching tires, the feeling of his chest tightening, the blur of rain against the windshield. He thought he was gone. Yet here he was, alive. As his eyes adjusted, the first thing they landed on was not the doctors, not the machines, not the expensive private room his wealth had secured. No, the first thing he saw was a little girl, curled up in a chair in the corner. It was Lily. Her small frame looked even more fragile under the harsh hospital lights. Her dress was still damp from the rain, clinging uncomfortably to her skin. Strands of wet hair stuck to her pale face, and though she was fast asleep, her body shivered every so often from the cold drafts seeping through the room. She had refused the blanket the nurses offered, insisting it be used for the man in the bed instead. Mr. Anderson's brows furrowed in confusion. He had spent his life surrounded by people who wanted something from him, employees eager for promotions, business partners hungry for profits, so-called friends who only came around when money was involved. But here was a child, clearly poor, clearly exhausted, who had nothing to gain from being here. And yet she stayed. Why? Why would she, of all people, risk everything to save him? A stranger, a man who, in the eyes of the world, already had more than enough? As he lay there, staring at the little girl sleeping in the corner, a strange ache filled his chest. Not the physical pain from his collapse, but something else, something he hadn't felt in years. Gratitude, compassion, and something that frightened him more than any business loss ever could. Vulnerability. Minutes ticked by, and finally Lily stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and when she saw him awake, she gasped, springing up from her chair. Her tiredness vanished instantly, replaced by pure relief. "You're alive!" she exclaimed, her small voice trembling with emotion. "Thank God you're alive." Her hands clutched the edge of the bed as though to steady herself, her wide eyes shining with tears. She had sat there for hours, refusing to leave until she was sure. And now, seeing him open his eyes, it was as if a massive weight had been lifted from her tiny shoulders. Mr. Anderson swallowed hard, his throat dry, his voice cracked as he managed to speak. You saved me?" Lily nodded softly. She wasn't proud or boastful. She simply answered as though it had been the only choice. "Yes, you were alone. Nobody was helping you. I couldn't just watch." Her words pierced him deeper than any boardroom insult or business betrayal ever had. Nobody was helping him. And it was true. In that busy city street, full of people rushing past, not one had stopped. Except her, a girl with nothing. A girl who had already lost more than anyone her age should. A girl who still found the strength to care. Anderson's eyes began to blur with tears. He quickly blinked, embarrassed. He was not a man who cried. In fact, he couldn't even remember the last time he had. His employees would never believe it. His competitors would laugh. The newspapers would never print it. The ruthless millionaire, the man who built skyscrapers with sheer willpower, was crying because of a little girl's kindness. But it was true. His lips trembled as he whispered, almost himself, "Why? Why would you help me?" Lily tilted her head, confused. "Because you needed help." It was the simplest answer in the world. And yet to him, it was profound. In his world, help always came with strings attached. Favors to be repaid, debts to be owed, deals to be made. But this child's answer carried no transaction, no demand. Just humanity. Mr. Anderson looked away for a moment, ashamed. All his life, he had thought money was a shield against loneliness, the cure for weakness, the measure of worth. But lying there, he realized money hadn't saved him. A poor 12-year-old girl had. The room fell quiet again, except for the faint beep of the heart monitor. Lily, sensing his silence, stepped back a little, unsure she had done something wrong. "I'm sorry if I shouldn't have stayed," she murmured nervously. I wanted to make sure you were okay." He turned back to her quickly, his voice breaking. "No, don't apologize. I don't even know how to thank you." Lily gave a small, shy smile. "You don't have to. I didn't do it for that." And that was when something inside him shifted. For the first time in years, Mr. Anderson felt something money had never been able to buy. Something he had almost forgotten existed. Genuine kindness. Not the kind that came with handshakes and hidden motives. Not the kind that came wrapped in contracts and promises. Pure, selfless kindness. From a girl who had every reason to turn away, but instead chose to step forward. And as he lay there with tears he could no longer hide slipping down his face, he realized this child had not only saved his life, she had awakened something far more important, his heart. By the time dawn broke, the storm had passed. The city streets outside glistened with puddles, sunlight dancing on the wet asphalt, as if the world itself was sighing in relief after a long night of chaos. But inside the hospital, another storm was brewing. This one made not of rain, but of flashing cameras, buzzing microphones, and relentless voices. News had spread like wildfire. A powerful millionaire, Mr. Anderson, had collapsed during the storm, and the one who would save him was not a doctor, not a bodyguard, not a colleague, but a 12-year-old girl selling tissues on the street. It was a kind of story that lit up headlines, the kind reporters craved and the public devoured. By morning, the hospital entrance was swarmed. Cameras clicked nonstop. Journalists shouted questions, their words blending into a blurred noise. Mr. Anderson, how do you feel knowing a child saved your life? Lily, how did you know what to do? Will you be rewarding her for her bravery? But behind the closed doors of his private room, Mr. Anderson sat up in his bed, his gaze fixed not on the crowd outside, but on the small figure sitting quietly in the corner. Lily, she looked nervous as nurses bustled in and out, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. She had never seen cameras before, never been asked questions by strangers in suits holding microphones. Her world had always been limited to the street lamp corner, the market stalls, and the tiny room where her sick mother lay waiting for her. Now, all eyes were on her, and she wasn't sure how to handle it. Anderson noticed the way her little hands fidgeted with the hem of her dress, the way her eyes darted around the room anxiously. His chest tightened. He had faced hostile investors, ruthless rivals, and reporters who twisted every word. But the little girl before him had faced life itself, with nothing to shield her. He couldn't let the world chew her up the way it had done to him. Gently, he motioned to the nurse. "Bring her here," he said softly. The nurse nodded and guided Lily closer to bed. She stood awkwardly, unsure if she should speak, her gaze fixed on the floor. She had never stood this close to a man like him before. A man who seemed larger than life, the kind whose face appeared in newspapers, the kind people whisper about with awe. But right now, he wasn't looking at her with power or pride. He looked at her with something far more human, gratitude. Slowly, Mr. Anderson reached out and took her small hand in his. His palm dwarfed hers, roughened by years of work and decisions, while her hand was tiny, delicate, trembling. The room fell quiet. Even the constant clicking of cameras seemed to fade outside the door. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice to a whisper meant only for her. His tone was soft, almost fragile. "Lily," he began, his eyes glistened with emotion. "You saved more than my life that night." Her wide eyes lifted to his, uncertain. "You saved my soul," he continued, his voice breaking. "I spent years chasing money, chasing power, believing that was all that mattered. But when I collapsed, when everyone else walked past me, it was you, a child with nothing, who gave me everything. Kindness, compassion, life." Tears burned in his eyes as he squeezed her hand gently. "From today, I promise you something. You'll never have to beg again. You'll never have to starve. You'll never have to cry yourself to sleep wondering how to take care of your mother. Not while I'm alive." Lily's lips parted, her breath caught in her throat. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold back the flood of emotions crashing inside her. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. No one had ever promised her safety or comfort or even noticed her pain. For so long, she had carried the weight of her world alone. And now, someone finally cared. Her tiny hands flew to her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks, streaming freely. She shook her head, almost in disbelief. "You mean it?" she whispered. Anderson nodded firmly. "With all my heart. I owe you everything. From this moment, you are not alone. Do you understand me?" The words echoed inside her chest, warming places that had long been cold. She nodded slowly, tears still streaming. "Thank you," she managed to say, her voice trembling but filled with relief. Anderson reached up, brushing a strand of wet hair from her forehead. "No, Lily, thank you." The nurse standing nearby dabbed at her eyes, moved by the exchange. Even the bodyguards outside, men hardened by years of duty, stood silently, their jaws tight, fighting back emotion. For once, this wasn't about business or money. It was about a man who had finally remembered what it meant to feel. At that very moment, the door burst open, and reporters tried to push their way in. Flashbulbs lit up the room, voices rose, and chaos threatened to break the tender moment. Anderson's face hardened. For years, he had entertained the media, shaped his image, played their games. But not today, not with Lily standing there, clutching his hand like a lifeline. "Out!" he barked, his voice thundering with authority. "All of you, out!" The security team rushed forward, pushing the reporters back as the door slammed shut. Silence returned. Anderson exhaled deeply and looked back at Lily, his expression softening once again. "You see," he said quietly, "the world may be loud, but when it matters, all that matters is who stands beside you." Lily wiped her tears, a small, trembling smile forming on her lips. For the first time in years, she felt safe. For the first time, she felt like a child again, not a provider, not a burden, not someone invisible to the world. Anderson held her hand tighter, making a silent vow in his heart. This wasn't just charity. This wasn't pity. This was a bond born in the rain, forged by compassion, and sealed with a promise he intended to keep. And that promise would change both of their lives forever. True to his word, Mr. Anderson didn't let Lily's sacrifice or her bravery fade into just another headline. When the cameras left, when the reporters moved on to the next story, his promise remained. And this time, unlike the shallow promises he'd once made in boardrooms, this one came straight from his heart. The very next week, doctors were sent to Lily's home. For the first time in years, her mother was given proper medical treatment. No longer did Lily have to watch helplessly as her mother struggled with illness, trapped in a cycle of poverty where medicine was always too expensive and hope always out of reach. Mr. Anderson paid for everything without a second thought. He didn't see it as charity. To him, it was a debt of gratitude, a way of honoring the little girl who had reminded him of his own humanity. But he didn't stop there. He made sure Lily's days of sitting under a street lamp selling tissues were over. He found them a safe, warm home. The peeling walls and leaky roof of their old room were replaced with a cozy apartment filled with light. Lily now had her own bed, her own desk, her own place to dream. For the first time, she didn't fall asleep to the sound of hunger in her stomach, but to the gentle hum of safety. Then came school. Mr. Anderson enrolled Lily in one of the best schools in the city. At first, she was shy, nervous about fitting in. She was a girl who had lived on the streets, the girl who had known hunger too well. But with every passing day, she began to shine. Her teachers marveled at her intelligence. Her classmates admired her courage, and slowly, the walls she had built around her heart began to fall. Yet what mattered most wasn't the money or the home, or even the education. It was the way Mr. Anderson treated her. He didn't look at her as a burden or a project or a story to brag about. He looked at her like family. He asked about her day. He listened when she talked. He clapped proudly when she showed him her grades. For a man who had once measured life in profits and losses, he had now discovered something priceless: the joy of giving love and receiving it back. Months later, the city gathered for a ceremony honoring acts of bravery. The mayor himself stood on stage, calling forward individuals who had made a difference in their community. And when Lily's name was announced, the crowd erupted into applause. She walked nervously onto the stage, her small frame dressed neatly in her new school uniform. The lights felt blinding, the cheers overwhelming. But as she looked out into the audience, she found the face that anchored her, Mr. Anderson. He was on his feet, clapping louder than anyone else, pride shining in his eyes. His wealth couldn't buy that kind of joy. His businesses couldn't manufacture that kind of pride. This was real, raw, human. The host placed a medal around Lily's neck, praising her courage. In a world where so many turn away, Lily ran toward someone in need, the speaker declared. She reminded us all what true compassion looks like. The audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Lily's cheeks flushed with emotion, her eyes stinging with tears. She wasn't used to being celebrated. She wasn't used to being seen. For so long, she had been invisible, a child the world ignored. But now, she stood tall, her bravery shining for everyone to witness. And in the front row, Mr. Anderson's eyes glistened. This little girl had changed him in ways no award ever could. Because the truth was, Lily had given him more than his life back. She had given him perspective. For years, he had been a man defined by wealth, numbers, and deals. Cold, distant, untouchable. But the night Lily pulled open that car door, everything shifted. He saw, through her selflessness, that compassion was the greatest form of wealth. Anderson was no longer the ruthless millionaire the city once knew. His employees noticed it. His business partners whispered about it. He was kinder now, more patient, more human. Where once he barked orders, he now asked questions. Where once he only signed checks, he now extended his hand to help. All because a poor little girl, with nothing to her name, had reminded him of what truly mattered. For Lily, life had changed too, but not just because of the money or the opportunities. What transformed her most was the feeling that she wasn't alone anymore. For years, she had carried the crushing weight of responsibility, fighting for survival with no one to lean on. But now, every time she remembered his whisper in that hospital room, "You'll never have to beg, starve, or cry again," her heart swelled with gratitude. Because in saving him, she hadn't just changed his life. She had changed her own. She had gained more than security. She had gained a father figure, a mentor, and a protector. And together, they carried forward a bond stronger than money, stronger than fame, stronger than circumstance. Anderson would often say in private that Lily had given him the most priceless gift of all, compassion. But Lily knew the truth went even deeper. She had shown him the meaning of love. And as the applause thundered that day in the hall, as Lily clutched her medal and smiled through her tears, both of them understood one thing clearly. Sometimes the smallest hands can carry the greatest strength, and sometimes the poorest heart can make the richest soul.